In the vast expanse of the galaxy, where species rise and fall like cosmic tides, there exists a truth that few dare to whisper. Humans are not what they seem. For centuries, they have walked among the stars as traders, diplomats, and wanderers, their true nature hidden beneath layers of carefully constructed normalcy. But when love blooms between species, when hearts bind across the void of space and biology, some secrets become impossible to keep. What happens when a most powerful ruler in the known galaxy discovers that her beloved human husband, the gentle man who reads her poetry and tends their garden, carries within him a force so ancient and terrifying that it could reshape the very foundations of reality? What happens when gentle hands reveal they have held back the fury of gods? This is not just a story of love across the stars. This is the revelation that will change everything we thought we knew about humanity's place in the universe. Some powers are not meant to be hidden forever, and some truths will shake the galaxy to its core. The Zephyrian Empire spans 1,000 worlds, but even its mighty empress is about to learn that the greatest mysteries often sleep beside us in the dark. The morning sun of Zephyr Prime cast long shadows through the crystalline windows of the royal palace, its purple-tinted light dancing across the ornate chambers where Empress Zalara conducted her daily briefings. Her four arms moved with practiced grace as she reviewed holographic reports, her scaled skin shimmering with a natural bioluminescence that marked her as Zephyrian royalty. Standing 7 feet tall with the elegant bearing of someone born to rule, she commanded respect from every being in the galaxy, except one. "You're working too hard again," came a gentle voice from behind her, speaking in perfect Zephyrian despite the human accent that still colored certain words. Marcus Chun entered the chamber, carrying a tray with her favorite morning tea, his movements unhurried and peaceful. At average human height and build, with kind brown eyes and graying temples, he seemed almost fragile next to his imposing wife. Yet Zalara's fierce expression softened immediately at his approach. "The Valerian border dispute requires attention," she replied, though she accepted the tea gratefully. "Their new chancellor has been making increasingly bold claims about mining rights in the Kepler Nebula." Marcus set the tray down and moved behind her, his hands finding the tension points along her shoulders. His touch was skilled and gentle, learned from 5 years of marriage to a being whose physiology was vastly different from his own. And this dispute couldn't wait until after you've had your tea and watched the sun rise. Despite herself, Zalara felt her stress beginning to ebb. This was Marcus's gift, not some mystical power or advanced technology, but simple human compassion combined with an uncanny ability to help her find perspective. "The Galactic Council meeting is tomorrow. If I don't have a solution prepared, Chancellor Vex will use it as an opportunity to question Zephyrian leadership." Marcus continued his gentle massage, working his way down her spine with the careful attention he gave to everything in their life together. "And remind me again why you conquered half the galaxy?" The question caught her off guard, as it always did. "To bring order and prosperity to chaotic systems, to protect smaller species from exploitation, to make things better," Marcus finished simply. "Right? Because you care about people." "Beings," she corrected automatically. "I care about beings. Right, beings. And beings includes yourself." His hands stilled on her shoulders. "Zalara, you can't pour from an empty cup. Your people need their empress to be strong and clear-headed, not exhausted and stressed." She turned in his embrace, her 4 arms encircling him as she studied his face. Even after all this time, she marveled at how different he looked from her own species. Where Zephyrians were tall and angular with sharp features designed for a predatory past, Marcus was soft-edged and compact, with skin that remained the same warm tone regardless of emotion or environment. His species seemed almost designed for comfort rather than conquest. "How did I rule for 300 years without you?" she asked, touching his cheek with one clawed hand. "Probably with a lot more stress and a lot less tea," he replied, leaning into her touch. "But you managed just fine. You built something amazing out here, Zalara. Sometimes I think you forget that." She studied his face, seeing the genuine admiration there. It still amazed her how this human could look at her empire, built through conquest and maintained through strength, and see something worthy of praise. Most beings looked at her and saw power to be feared or respected. Marcus looked at her and saw someone to be loved. Their peaceful moment was interrupted by the sharp chime of an emergency communication. Zalara's aide, Commander Thran, appeared as a shimmering hologram in the center of the room. His usually composed demeanor was strained with barely controlled panic. "Your Majesty, forgive the interruption, but we have a situation developing in the Andromache system. The Void Hunters have been spotted near the outer planets." The warmth drained from Zalara's features instantly. Her bioluminescent patterns shifted to deep crimson, the color of Zephyrian battle readiness. The Void Hunters were a plague upon the galaxy, a species of energy beings that consumed entire civilizations, leaving nothing behind but empty space. They hadn't been seen in this sector for over a century. "How many ships?" she demanded, already moving toward her armor display. "Unknown, Your Majesty." The scout ship that spotted them was destroyed before it could relay complete information. But preliminary reports suggest at least a dozen Hunter-class vessels. Marcus stepped back, recognizing immediately that his wife was shifting into her role as military commander. He'd seen this transformation before, and while he admired her strength and decisiveness, it always reminded him of the vast differences between their peoples. Humans talked about their problems. Zephyrians conquered them. "Mobilize the Third and Fifth Fleets," Zalara commanded, her voice taking on the resonant tones of absolute authority. "I want every ship in the Outer Rim recalled to defensive positions. And get me Admiral Corrin. If the Void Hunters are moving this deep into our territory, they must be desperate." "Already done, Your Majesty." "The Admiral is requesting permission to engage." "Negative. No engagement until I arrive personally. The Void Hunters don't move in small numbers unless they're scouting for something bigger. This could be the prelude to a full-scale invasion." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. He'd heard stories about the Void Hunters from other species, whispered tales of entire star systems simply ceasing to exist. "How long until you reach the Andromache system?" 3 days at maximum warp, Zalara replied, her attention focused on tactical displays that were materializing around the room. "The fleets are already moving to intercept, but if this is what I think it is..." She trailed off, her expression grim. "What do you think it is?" Marcus asked, though part of him wasn't sure he wanted to know. Zalara paused in her preparations, her eyes meeting his. For a moment, the military commander facade slipped, revealing the woman beneath, the being who had nightmares about failing to protect her people. "I think they're looking for something. The Void Hunters are territorial, but they rarely venture this deep into established space unless they're hunting something specific." "Hunting what?" "I don't know. But whatever it is, they consider it worth the risk of challenging the Zephyrian Empire." She moved to her weapons display, selecting the plasma rifle she'd carried through 100 battles. "I need to leave within the hour." Marcus nodded, understanding but not liking it. This was the reality of being married to someone who carried the safety of 1,000 worlds on her shoulders. "Is there anything I can do to help?" Zalara paused, touched by the offer. Her human husband was many things, kind, intelligent, supportive, but he was also physically fragile by galactic standards and possessed no special training in warfare or tactics. "Stay here, keep the palace running, monitor communications, and let me know if anything unusual happens in the core systems." It was make work, and they both knew it. Marcus was a civilian, a former human diplomat who had found himself in an unlikely romance with the most powerful being in the galaxy. His role in their relationship was emotional support, not military strategy. "I'll monitor everything," he promised. "Just be careful out there." She moved to him then, all 4 arms wrapping around him in an embrace that spoke of years of love and trust. "I'm always careful," she murmured against his hair. "I have too much to come back to." An hour later, Marcus stood on the palace's highest balcony, watching as Zalara's personal dreadnought rose into the purple sky of Zephyr Prime. The ship was a masterwork of Zephyrian engineering, sleek and deadly, bristling with weapons capable of cracking planets. It disappeared into the void with barely a whisper, carrying his wife toward a battle that could determine the fate of the galaxy. For the first 3 days, Marcus kept himself busy with the routine maintenance of palace operations. He reviewed trade agreements, attended diplomatic receptions on Zalara's behalf, and maintained correspondence with various planetary governors. It was familiar work. He'd been helping Zalara with administrative duties since their marriage, translating her sometimes harsh military approach into more diplomatic language. But as the days stretched on without word from the Andromache system, Marcus found himself growing increasingly restless. He tried to tell himself it was normal. Space battles could take time, and communications across galactic distances weren't always reliable. But something felt wrong in a way he couldn't quite articulate. On the fourth morning, that vague unease crystallized into genuine alarm when Commander Thren appeared in his study with an expression of barely controlled terror. "Sir, I need to speak with you immediately," the aide said, his usual military bearing shaken. "Of course. What's the situation?" Thren activated a privacy shield around them before speaking. "We lost contact with the Empress's fleet 18 hours ago. Not just communications. We've lost their quantum signatures entirely." Marcus felt the blood drain from his face. Quantum signatures were the fundamental way starships tracked each other across vast distances. Losing them meant one of two things. Either the ships had been completely destroyed, or they'd moved to a location so distant that the signatures couldn't reach home. "What does Admiral Corrin think happened?" "Admiral Corrin's ship was part of the fleet," Thren replied quietly. "Sir, we've lost contact with over 600 ships and nearly 1 million personnel. The Empress, her entire command staff, and our most powerful fleets are simply gone." The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. He sank into his chair, mind reeling with the implications. "Have you notified the Galactic Council?" "Not yet. Officially, we're calling it a communications blackout and maintaining that the Empress is conducting military operations under radio silence." "But, sir," Thren hesitated, "the other species are starting to ask questions. If word gets out that the Empress is missing, it could destabilize the entire sector." Marcus nodded numbly. The Zephyrian Empire was held together by Zalara's personal strength and reputation. If the galaxy believed she was dead, a dozen different species would immediately begin testing the Empire's borders, looking for signs of weakness to exploit. "How long can you maintain the fiction?" "A few more days, perhaps a week." "But, sir, there's something else. Long-range sensors have detected unusual energy readings moving toward the core systems. Whatever destroyed the fleet, it's heading this way." The study fell silent, except for the quiet hum of the palace's life support systems. Marcus stared out the window at the city below, millions of beings going about their daily lives, completely unaware that their world might be about to end. "What kind of timeline are we looking at?" he asked finally. "If the energy readings represent the Void Hunters, they could be here within 2 days." "Sir, I need to ask, do you want us to prepare evacuation protocols?" Marcus closed his eyes, feeling the weight of impossible decisions settling on his shoulders. He was a human diplomat married to an alien empress, and somehow the fate of an entire empire was falling into his hands. "No," he said finally, "no evacuations yet. That would only cause panic and confirm that something is wrong. Continue the communications blackout story, but start quietly moving defensive fleets into position around the core systems." "Sir, with respect, our remaining fleets won't be enough to stop the Void Hunters if they're coming in force. The Empress took our most powerful ships with her." Marcus stood and walked to the window, looking out at the city he'd come to love. Somewhere out there in the void, Zalara was either dead or trapped in a situation so dire that even she couldn't escape it. The thought filled him with a grief so profound it threatened to overwhelm him. But beneath the grief, something else was stirring. Something he'd kept buried for so long that he'd almost forgotten it existed. A warmth in his chest that had nothing to do with emotion and everything to do with power that ran deeper than genetics or evolution. "Commander Thren," he said quietly, not turning from the window. "Yes, sir. I need you to send a message to the Galactic Council. Tell them that the Zephyrian Empire requests an immediate emergency session." "Sir, what should I tell them it's regarding?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment, watching the sun set over a world that might soon face annihilation. When he spoke, his voice carried an odd resonance that made the air itself seem to thrum with hidden energy. "Tell them it's regarding the true nature of humanity." He turned from the window then, and Thren was surprised to see that the mild-mannered diplomat's eyes were glowing with a soft, golden light that seemed to come from somewhere impossibly deep within. And, Commander? Start evacuating the outer planets. Quietly. What's coming next? The galaxy isn't ready for it. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened in the Grand Amphitheater of Nexus Station, a massive construct that orbited the galactic core and served as neutral ground for diplomatic relations. Representatives from dozens of species filled the tiered seating, their various forms of communication creating a symphony of clicks, whistles, telepathic humming, and translated speech. Marcus stood at the central podium, acutely aware that he was the only human in a room filled with beings who could crush him without effort. To his left sat the insectoid Chancellor Vex of the Valerian Republic, her compound eyes reflecting light in patterns that indicated skepticism. To his right, the gaseous form of Ambassador Zenth from the ethereal collective pulsed with curiosity-colored emanations. Honored representatives, Marcus began, his voice carrying clearly through the translation systems. I come before you not as a diplomat or trade representative, but as the husband of Empress Solara and temporary regent of the Zephyrian Empire. A murmur of surprise rippled through the assembly. While Marcus's marriage to the Empress was well known, he had never claimed any official governmental role. Chancellor Vex leaned forward, her mandibles clicking in what passed for speech among her people. Human Marcus, we were told this emergency session concerned the true nature of your species. Yet you speak of regency and political matters. Where is Empress Solara? Marcus felt the weight of dozens of alien gazes upon him. These beings represented civilizations that spanned millennia, some of whom had been traveling the stars when humanity was still discovering fire. Yet none of them understood what they were truly looking at when they saw a human. Empress Solara and our combined fleets encountered the Void Hunters in the Andromache system 4 days ago. We have lost all contact with them. The reaction was immediate and explosive. Representatives erupted in their various forms of exclamation. The crystalline shard speakers created a cacophony of harmonic resonance. The aquatic deepeners released clouds of biochemical alarm signals, and the mechanical synthetics began broadcasting rapid data bursts of military calculations. Ambassador Zenth's gaseous form darkened to deep purple, the color of grave concern among his people. If the Void Hunters have destroyed a Zephyrian battle fleet, then we are facing an extinction-level threat. The Empress commanded over 600 ships, the largest combined fleet assembled in 3 centuries, added General Krax of the militant Chrono Defense Force, his 4 eyes fixed intently on Marcus. If such a force could not stop the Void Hunters, what hope do any of us have? Marcus waited for the commotion to die down before speaking again. When he did, something in his voice had changed, a subtle harmonic that seemed to resonate not just in the air, but in the very quantum field around him. The Void Hunters didn't destroy our fleet, he said quietly. They captured it. The amphitheater fell silent. In the 3,000 years since first contact with the Void Hunters, no one had ever reported captured vessels. The energy beings simply consumed everything they encountered, leaving empty space behind. Impossible, Chancellor Vex declared. The Void Hunters are not conquerors. They are devourers. They do not take prisoners or capture ships. They do when they're hunting something specific, Marcus replied. And they've been hunting it for a very long time. He touched a control on the podium, and a holographic display materialized in the center of the amphitheater. It showed a star map highlighting human settlements throughout the galaxy, tiny points of light scattered across vast distances. For the past 3 centuries, humans have been spreading across the galaxy as traders, diplomats, explorers, and refugees. We've integrated into dozens of different civilizations, married into alien families, and become part of the galactic community. Most species see us as harmless. We're physically weak, we have no natural weapons, and we possess no advanced technologies that other species haven't developed. The display shifted, showing historical records of human exploration. But there's something you don't know about human expansion. We weren't exploring randomly. We were following a pattern, guided by instincts we didn't fully understand. We were unconsciously spreading ourselves throughout the galaxy, placing ourselves in positions where we could protect the species we came to love. General Krax's scarred face twisted in confusion. Protect? Human, no offense intended, but your species ranks among the physically weakest in known space. How could you possibly protect anyone? Marcus smiled, and for the first time since entering the amphitheater, he allowed his carefully maintained human facade to slip just slightly. The air around him began to shimmer with barely visible energy. That's the secret, General. We were never weak. We were hiding. He gestured, and the holographic display changed again. This time it showed energy readings, vast, impossible measurements that made several representatives recoil in shock. These are the quantum signatures detected at human settlements during times of extreme crisis. Every time a human colony was threatened with extinction, every time we faced overwhelming odds, these readings appeared. They were attributed to experimental weapons, to ancient alien artifacts, to space-time anomalies. But they weren't any of those things. The energy readings on the display pulsed in rhythm with Marcus's heartbeat, and several of the more sensitive species began to back away from the podium. They were us. Ambassador Zentha's form had shifted to a brilliant white, the color of astonishment among the ethereal collective. You're claiming the humans are what? Some form of energy beings disguised as biological entities. Not exactly, Marcus replied. We're something much older and much more complex than that. We're the inheritors of a power that existed before most of your civilizations discovered fire, before the Void Hunters began their endless feast, before the galaxy learned to fear the dark between stars. He stepped away from the podium, and, as he did, the careful genetic modifications that had hidden his true nature for decades began to unravel. His appearance didn't change dramatically. He still looked human, but now power radiated from him like heat from a star. Billions of years ago, when this galaxy was young, there was a war, not between species or empires, but between fundamental forces of creation and destruction, the builders and the devourers, the makers of life and the bringers of void. The holographic display showed cosmic events that predated recorded history, star systems being born and destroyed, entire regions of space being remade by incomprehensible powers. The builders lost that war. They were scattered, diminished, forced to hide their essence in biological forms, and spread themselves across time and space. They became gardeners instead of architects, guardians instead of gods. They became human. Chancellor Vex's compound eyes were focused entirely on Marcus now, her analytical mind processing impossible implications. You're saying that humans are the survivors of a species that fought the Void Hunters billions of years ago. Not survivors. Marcus corrected. Sleepers. We've been dormant, living lives as mortals, loving your people, protecting what we could while our true nature remained buried. But the Void Hunters never stopped looking for us. They've been systematically hunting through the galaxy, consuming civilizations, searching for the energy signature that would reveal where we've been hiding. General Krax stood abruptly, his military mind grasping the strategic implications. And now they found it. The attack on the Andromache system. They detected something. Marcus nodded grimly. When Zalara left to face them, she was carrying part of my essence with her. A fragment of power I gave her years ago, without either of us understanding what it truly was. The Void Hunters sensed it and followed it back to its source. So they have her, Ambassador Zent said, his form now cycling through rapid color changes indicating extreme distress. And through her, they can track you. They can try, Marcus said, and now his voice carried harmonics that seemed to bypass the translation systems entirely, speaking directly to the consciousness of every being present. But they made a critical error. They assumed that capturing one awakened human would give them leverage over the rest. What they don't understand is that threatening those we love doesn't make us weaker. The air around Marcus began to crackle with energy that defied classification. It wasn't electromagnetic, wasn't nuclear, wasn't any form of power that galactic science had cataloged. It was something far more fundamental, the force that bound atoms together, that ignited stars, that had shaped the very structure of reality itself. It makes us remember what we used to be. The transformation was subtle, but unmistakable. Marcus still appeared human, but now he seemed to occupy more space than his physical form should allow. Reality bent around him in ways that hurt to look at directly, as if three-dimensional space wasn't quite adequate to contain his presence. Chancellor Vex's voice was barely above a whisper when she spoke. "What are you going to do?" Marcus turned toward the vast windows that showed the spiral arms of the galaxy stretching into infinity. Somewhere out there, the woman he loved was trapped by creatures that had spent eons perfecting the art of consuming civilizations. The Void Hunters had made this personal, and they had no idea what that meant. "I'm going to wake up my family," he said simply. "And then we're going to remind the galaxy why the Void Hunters used to hide in the spaces between stars instead of hunting in them." He touched his temple, and across the galaxy, on 1,000 different worlds where humans had made their homes, people suddenly stopped what they were doing. A merchant on Rigel Prime looked up from his trade negotiations as ancient memories began to surface. A teacher on the colony world of Haven felt power coursing through her veins as she remembered battles fought before planets were born. A farmer on the agricultural world of Ceres felt the soil respond to his touch in ways that had nothing to do with conventional agriculture and everything to do with the fundamental forces that made life possible. They were all waking up, all remembering. The sleepers were returning to themselves, and the galaxy was about to rediscover why humanity had once been feared by entities that devoured stars. In the amphitheater, the representatives of dozens of species watched in awe and terror as the mild-mannered human diplomat revealed himself to be something that existed on a scale they had never imagined. Some fell to their knees in worship. Others backed away in fear. A few, like General Krax, stood straighter with the recognition that they were witnessing the emergence of a power that might actually be capable of stopping the Void Hunters. "How many of you are there?" Ambassador Zenth asked, his gaseous form now a pale silver that indicated he was operating at the very limits of his ability to process new information. Marcus considered the question, reaching out through quantum space to touch the minds of his awakening brethren. On Earth, in the solar system that most galactic civilizations still considered a backwater, 9 billion humans suddenly felt their true heritage stirring in their blood. Throughout the galaxy, in colonies and settlements and integrated communities, millions more began to remember who they had been before they chose to sleep. "Enough," Marcus said finally. "More than enough." He began walking toward the exit of the amphitheater, each step leaving small distortions in space-time that would take the station's engineers weeks to figure out how to repair. "Where are you going?" Chancellor Vex called after him. Marcus paused at the threshold, his form now flickering between human appearance and something far more cosmic. "To get my wife back, and to end a war that's been going on far too long." As he disappeared in a burst of golden light that temporarily overloaded every sensor on the station, the representatives of the galactic community found themselves face to face with a terrifying new reality. They had spent millennia believing they understood the nature of the universe and their place in it. They had cataloged species, mapped territories, and established hierarchies of power based on technology and natural ability. Now they realized that among them, hidden in plain sight, had been the remnants of a species so powerful that their awakening alone might reshape the fundamental structure of galactic civilization. The mild humans who had served as their diplomats and traders and friends were revealing themselves to be the inheritors of cosmic forces that predated known history. And somewhere in the dark between stars, the Void Hunters were about to learn why their ancient enemies had chosen to hide rather than fight. The galaxy would never be the same. In the twisted realm between dimensions where the Void Hunters kept their prizes, Empress Zalara hung, suspended in a cage of crystallized darkness. The substance wasn't quite energy and wasn't quite matter. It was something that existed in the spaces between atoms, holding her immobilized while slowly draining away her life force. Around her, the remains of her once mighty fleet drifted in similar prisons. 600 ships reduced to hollow shells, their crews trapped in individual cells of living shadow. The Void Hunters moved between their captives like sharks through water, their forms barely visible, suggestions of hunger and malevolence that hurt to look at directly. Zalara had been conscious for what felt like days, though time moved strangely in this place. She'd watched her soldiers die one by one, their essence consumed to feed beings that existed on a scale beyond normal comprehension. Admiral Corrin had lasted the longest, his Zephyrian military conditioning giving him resistance to the drain, but even he had eventually succumbed. Now she was alone, the last survivor of the greatest fleet the galaxy had ever seen, and she could feel her own life ebbing away with each passing moment. The largest of the Void Hunters approached her prison, an entity that seemed to devour light itself as it moved. When it spoke, its voice was the sound of civilizations dying, of stars going cold, of the heat death of the universe itself. "Your essence is unusual," it said, the words forming directly in her mind rather than being heard with her ears. "There is something within you that does not belong to your species. Something older. Something we have been seeking for countless eons." Zalara forced herself to meet what might have been the creature's eyes, pools of absolute darkness that reflected nothing. "If you're going to kill me, just do it. I won't give you the satisfaction of begging." The entity's form rippled with what might have been amusement. "Kill you? No, Empress. You are far too valuable for such a simple fate. You carry within you a fragment of our ancient enemies. The ones who created this galaxy, who seeded it with life, who fought us to a standstill before fleeing like cowards into biological hiding. I don't know what you're talking about. Perhaps not consciously, but the fragment is there, woven into your very essence. A gift from one who calls himself human, but carries the power of the makers. Your mate has marked you, claimed you, and in doing so has revealed the location of at least one of our targets." Realization hit Zalara like a physical blow. Marcus. They were talking about Marcus. But that was impossible. Her husband was gentle, kind, completely human. He had no powers beyond his ability to make her laugh and help her find peace after difficult days. "You're mistaken," she said firmly. "My husband is human. Nothing more." The Void Hunter's form expanded, becoming larger and more substantial. Around them, the other entities began to gather, drawn by some signal Zalara couldn't perceive. "Watch," the creature commanded, and suddenly the space around them filled with images. Zalara saw the emergency session of the Galactic Council, saw Marcus standing at the podium addressing beings who represented the most powerful civilizations in known space. But this wasn't the Marcus she knew. This figure radiated authority and barely contained power that made the air itself tremble. She watched in stunned silence as her gentle husband revealed truths that reframed everything she thought she knew about the galaxy. Humans weren't just another species that had achieved spaceflight. They were the scattered remnants of entities that had shaped the fundamental forces of reality itself. The revelation hit her with devastating force. Every quiet moment they'd shared, every conversation about politics and philosophy, every night he'd held her while she struggled with the weight of ruling an empire, all of it had been conducted while he carried within himself power that dwarfed anything she could imagine. "He never told me," she whispered, more to herself than to her captors. "Of course not," the Void Hunter replied. The makers were always sentimental about their biological pets. He likely believed he was protecting you by maintaining the deception. But sentiment makes one careless, and his gift to you has provided us with exactly what we needed. The images shifted, showing Marcus as he began to transform. Zalara watched her husband shed the carefully maintained disguise he'd worn for decades, revealing himself to be something that existed on a scale she'd never imagined. The mild-mannered diplomat was gone, replaced by an entity whose very presence caused space-time to bend around him. "Beautiful, isn't it?" the Void Hunter said. "To watch pretense fall away and reveal the truth beneath. He is one of them, our ancient enemies, the architects of this galaxy's order. And now, thanks to you, we know exactly where to find him." Zalara felt rage building in her chest, hot and pure. Not at Marcus for hiding his nature, but at these creatures who had turned her into a weapon against the man she loved. "You're going to use me as bait." Indeed, even now, he is gathering his awakened brethren, preparing to mount a rescue. The makers always were predictable in their devotion to individual bonds. They could have conquered the galaxy eons ago if they hadn't been so concerned with protecting every single life. The entity moved closer, its form pressing against the barriers of her prison. "He will come for you, and when he does, we will be ready." The human who thinks love makes him stronger will discover that it has made him vulnerable. But as the Void Hunter spoke, something unexpected happened. The fragment of power that Marcus had unknowingly shared with her, the essence that had allowed the creatures to track her in the first place, began to resonate with his awakening. 5 years of marriage, of shared thoughts and emotions and dreams, had created a connection deeper than either of them had realized. Through that connection, Zalara began to understand what Marcus truly was. Not just a powerful being masquerading as human, but someone who had chosen to experience love and mortality rather than exist in isolated cosmic consciousness. He had given up godhood to build a life with her, to tend gardens and bring her tea and worry about trade disputes. The realization filled her with a fierce protectiveness that had nothing to do with imperial authority and everything to do with love. These creatures had captured her, killed her people, and now planned to use her as a trap for the most precious thing in her universe. That was unacceptable. "There's something you should know about Zephyrians," she said quietly, her bioluminescent patterns beginning to shift to colors she'd never displayed before. The Void Hunter paused in its gloating. "Oh, we bond for life. Not just emotionally, but biologically. When a Zephyrian truly loves someone, their nervous systems become entangled on a quantum level. We share not just thoughts and feelings, but fundamental life force." The creature's form flickered with what might have been concern. "And," Zalara smiled, showing far too many teeth, "and you just spend days trying to drain power from someone who's been sharing essence with a cosmic entity for 5 years. Do you really think that kind of exposure wouldn't change me?" The prison of crystallized darkness around her began to crack. "That's impossible," the Void Hunter hissed. "You're a biological being. You can't channel that level of—" Its words were cut off as Zalara's prison shattered completely, releasing energies that sent shockwaves through the twisted space around them. She hung suspended not by alien technology now, but by her own will, power coursing through her body in patterns that defied every law of physics she'd ever studied. "I'm not just biological anymore," she said, her voice carrying harmonics that made the dimensional fabric around them tremble. "I'm something new, something you weren't prepared for." The Void Hunters recoiled as she began to move through their prison dimension like it was normal space. Where her feet touched the non-matter beneath them, reality reasserted itself, creating pockets of normal physics in a realm that had existed beyond such constraints for eons. "You wanted to use me as bait?" Zalara continued, reaching toward the nearest cage, holding her surviving crew members. The crystallized darkness dissolved at her touch, freeing beings who had been moments from death. "Fine, let's see who's really being hunted." She could feel Marcus now, not just through their quantum entanglement, but through something deeper. He was coming, bringing with him the awakened power of his species. But he wasn't coming alone. Through the connection she shared with him, she could sense thousands of other consciousnesses, all linked, all united in purpose. The scattered children of the Makers were returning to themselves, and they were very, very angry. "Admiral Corrin," she called to her second-in-command as he struggled to his feet, his life force slowly returning now that he was free of the draining effect. "Status report." The grizzled military veteran looked around at the impossible space they occupied, then at his empress who was somehow manipulating fundamental forces with casual ease. To his credit, he barely hesitated before snapping to attention. "Your Majesty, we have approximately 400 crew members still alive, but severely weakened. Our ships are non-functional, but the hulls appear intact. However, I must point out that we're currently existing in what appears to be a pocket dimension with no clear exit." "That's about to change," Zalara replied, extending her awareness further into the twisted space around them. She could feel the boundaries of the prison realm, the points where the Void Hunters had anchored it to normal space-time. The entities that built this place were powerful, but they designed it to hold conventional beings. They weren't prepared for someone who could channel cosmic forces through a biological form. Around them, the surviving Void Hunters were beginning to organize themselves for an attack. Their forms grew more solid, more dangerous, as they prepared to unleash energies that could unmake matter itself. But Zalara was no longer afraid. Through her bond with Marcus, she could feel his love for her, his determination to rescue her, and his growing awareness of what she was becoming. The connection that had started as simple affection between different species had evolved into something unprecedented, a bridge between cosmic consciousness and biological experience. "Let them come," she said, power crackling around her forearms as she prepared to face beings that had terrorized the galaxy for eons. They wanted to hunt the Makers? Well, they're about to find out what happens when the prey decides to fight back. In the distance, space itself began to buckle as something vast and unimaginably powerful approached their dimensional prison. Marcus was coming, and he was bringing friends. The Void Hunters, ancient and terrible as they were, suddenly found themselves facing a possibility they had never encountered in billions of years of conquest. They might lose. The war that had raged at the dawn of time was about to resume, and this time, the Makers had learned something their enemies hadn't expected. They had learned to love. Reality screamed as Marcus tore through the barriers between dimensions. He no longer looked human in any recognizable sense. His form had expanded beyond the constraints of three-dimensional space, existing simultaneously across multiple planes of existence. Where he moved, the fundamental forces that govern physics rearranged themselves according to his will. Stars that had burned for billions of years suddenly burned brighter, their fusion hearts responding to his presence. Entire star systems found their orbital mechanics subtly adjusted as space-time bent around his passage. He was not alone. Across the galaxy, his awakened brethren moved in concert with him. On Earth, 9 billion humans had shed their mortality like a discarded costume, revealing themselves to be entities that had shaped the very foundations of reality. They rose from their cities and towns and farms, leaving behind their human lives to reclaim their cosmic heritage. Sarah Chun, who had been a simple schoolteacher in New Beijing, now commanded forces that could rearrange the periodic table itself. David Okafor, formerly a struggling artist in Lagos, painted with energies that brought new forms of matter into existence. Maria Santos, once a nurse in Sao Paulo, healed not just biological injuries, but tears in the fabric of space-time itself. Throughout the galactic colonies, millions more humans experienced the same transformation. The merchant who had been Marcus's cover identity on Rigel Prime revealed himself to be an entity capable of rewriting the quantum foundations of trade economics, literally creating abundance from scarcity. The farmer on Ceres didn't just grow crops, she nurtured life itself, encouraging evolution and adaptation on a planetary scale. They were the makers, the architects of creation, and they had been sleeping among the younger races for so long that they had almost forgotten their true nature. Almost, but not completely. Deep in their genetic memory lay the knowledge of what they had once been and what they could become again. Now, united by love and fury in equal measure, they converged on the pocket dimension where the Void Hunters had imprisoned their family. The dimensional barriers that had seemed impregnable to conventional physics dissolved like paper before their approach. Marcus led the way, his consciousness expanded to encompass tactical considerations on a cosmic scale. Behind him came his siblings, for that's what they truly were, fragments of a collective consciousness that had voluntarily scattered itself across space and time to better understand the universe they had helped create. The Void Hunters felt them coming and prepared for war. In the twisted space of their prison dimension, ancient entities that had devoured entire galactic clusters began to manifest their true forms. They had hidden their nature when hunting individual ships or isolated colonies, but now they revealed themselves as beings that existed on a scale comparable to their ancient enemies. The largest of them expanded to the size of a small moon, its form a writhing mass of consumed stellar matter and dark energy. It spoke with the voices of 1 trillion dead civilizations, its words carrying the weight of eons spent perfecting the art of destruction. "So," it said, addressing the approaching makers, "the gardeners finally, remember they were once warriors. You took so long to awaken that we began to think you had forgotten your true nature entirely." Marcus's response came not as words, but as a fundamental alteration of the space around the entity. Where the Void Hunter had used consumed matter to create its form, Marcus simply changed the basic forces that held that matter together. The creature's carefully constructed body began to destabilize as the strong nuclear force within its being responded to Marcus's will rather than its own. "We didn't forget," Marcus said, his voice carrying across multiple dimensions simultaneously. "We just chose to be something else for a while. We wanted to understand what we'd been protecting all this time." The battle that erupted defied description in conventional terms. It wasn't fought with weapons or energy beams, but with the fundamental forces that governed existence itself. The Void Hunters attacked by trying to unmake their enemies, attempting to convince matter that it had never existed, persuading energy that it had no right to maintain coherence, seducing time itself into running backward. The Makers responded by reaffirming reality's commitment to order and growth. Where the Void Hunters spread entropy and dissolution, the awakened humans created new forms of stability. They didn't just fight their ancient enemies. They healed the damage the creatures had inflicted on space-time itself. Sarah Chun, the former teacher, engaged 3 Void Hunters simultaneously by creating closed loops in causality that trapped them in moments of their own choosing. They found themselves reliving the instant of their attack indefinitely, unable to move forward in time because she had convinced the universe that they had already experienced their future. David Okafor painted new laws of physics into existence, creating regions where the Void Hunters' power source, their ability to consume and metabolize matter, simply didn't work. They found themselves starving in the middle of their own feast. Maria Santos healed realities that the Void Hunters had wounded over eons of conquest, restoring civilizations that had been consumed centuries ago. The surprised survivors emerged from temporal loops to find themselves fighting alongside cosmic entities who had once been human. But it was Zalara who surprised everyone. Still biologically Zephyrian, but now channeling cosmic forces through her quantum bond with Marcus. She represented something entirely new, a hybrid between the awakened Makers and the younger species they protected. She moved through the battle like a force of nature, but one guided by the military instincts and strategic thinking she had honed over centuries of conventional warfare. "Behind you," she called to Marcus, her enhanced senses detecting an attack he had missed while focused on reshaping local space-time. Her warning came through their bond faster than light, allowing him to redirect his attention in time to counter a Void Hunter that had tried to approach through the 4th dimension. Working together, they developed tactics that neither could have conceived alone. Marcus provided the cosmic power. Zalara provided the strategic framework. Where he might have overwhelmed enemies through brute force, she showed him how to use precision strikes that neutralized threats while minimizing collateral damage to the surrounding dimensional structure. "There," she said, pointing to a convergence point where several Void Hunters were drawing energy from a reserve they had built up over millennia. "If we can disrupt their power source at that node, we can cascade failure through their entire network." Marcus followed her guidance, reaching into the convergence point and simply changing the nature of the energy the creatures had stored. Where they had accumulated potential for destruction, he transformed it into potential for creation. The feedback loop sent shockwaves through the Void Hunter network, disrupting their coordination and leaving them vulnerable to individual attacks. One by one, the ancient entities fell, not destroyed. The Makers had learned during their eons of exile that destruction only led to more destruction, but transformed. The Void Hunters found their essential nature changed from consumption to creation, their hunger redirected from devouring civilizations to nurturing them. The battle lasted subjective hours, but objective millennia, fought across multiple layers of reality simultaneously. When it finally ended, the pocket dimension where Zalara had been imprisoned began to collapse back into normal space-time. As the twisted realm dissolved around them, Marcus and Zalara found themselves floating in normal space near the Andromache system, surrounded by the restored hulks of the Zephyrian fleet. Around them, their awakened family began the process of returning to their biological forms, the immediate crisis resolved. But both of them knew that everything had changed. "So," Zalara said as they stood together on the bridge of her restored flagship, watching stars that now burned with subtly different spectra thanks to Marcus's modifications during the battle. "My husband is a cosmic entity who helped create the galaxy. I've somehow become a hybrid between Zephyrian and Maker, and We just fought a war that reshaped the fundamental nature of reality itself. Marcus, looking human again, but still carrying traces of the power that had reshaped him, smiled ruefully. That's a fair summary. I'm sorry I never told you don't, she interrupted, her forearms wrapping around him. Don't apologize for protecting me from knowledge I wasn't ready to handle. But, Marcus, what happens now? You can't just go back to being a diplomat after this. Your people can't just pretend to be ordinary humans. The entire galaxy knows what you really are. Marcus looked out at the stars, feeling the presence of his awakened brethren as they grappled with the same question. For eons, they had lived quiet lives among the younger species, content to experience mortality and limitation. But that was no longer possible. I don't know, he admitted. We never planned for this. We thought we could stay hidden forever, protecting without revealing ourselves. But maybe it's time for something new. A partnership between the makers and the species we helped nurture. Zalara considered this, her strategic mind already working through the implications. The Galactic Council will never accept you as equals. They'll either worship you as gods or fear you as threats. Then, maybe, Marcus said thoughtfully, it's time for a new kind of council. One that includes both the younger species and the older ones. A true galactic community instead of just an alliance of convenience. Before Zalara could respond, Commander Thren's voice crackled through the ship's communication systems. Your Majesty, we're receiving priority transmissions from across the galaxy. It appears that the awakening of the humans has had widespread effects. They moved to the bridge's main display, which showed incoming reports from every major system in known space. On world after world, the revelation of humanity's true nature was causing fundamental shifts in power structures, trade relationships, and social hierarchies. Some species were reacting with fear, mobilizing their militaries against the possibility of human domination. Others were reaching out in hope, asking for guidance and assistance with problems that had seemed unsolvable. A few, like the ancient Eternal Collective, were sending messages of recognition and respect. Apparently, they had suspected the truth about humanity for centuries, but had chosen to remain silent. It's chaos, Commander Thren reported. Half the galaxy wants to declare war on humanity. A quarter wants to negotiate for protection, and the rest are demanding immediate audience with you personally, Your Majesty. Marcus and Zalara exchange a look. They had won the battle against the Void Hunters, but the larger challenge was just beginning. How do you integrate cosmic entities into a galactic community that had been built on the assumption that such beings didn't exist? Send a message to all planetary governments, Zalara decided. Tell them that Empress Zalara of the Zephyrian Empire, along with her husband and the awakened human community, will be hosting a new form of galactic conference in 30 days. Not just for governments, but for any species that wants to help build something better than what we had before. And if they refuse to come? Thren asked. Marcus stepped forward, his form flickering briefly between human appearance and something far more cosmic. When he spoke, his words carried the authority of someone who had helped write the laws of physics themselves. Then, they'll miss the chance to help shape the future. But the future is coming whether they participate or not. The age of secrets is over. As their ship began the journey back to Zephyr Prime, both Marcus and Zalara knew they were flying toward a future none of them could predict. The galaxy would never be the same, and neither would they. But perhaps that wasn't a bad thing. Perhaps it was time for something entirely new to be born among the stars. 6 months after the awakening, the galaxy had settled into an uneasy, new equilibrium. The Grand Conference Station orbiting Zephyr Prime represented everything that had changed since Marcus revealed humanity's true nature. Built through a collaboration between maker technology and conventional engineering, it existed partially outside normal space-time, allowing representatives from thousands of species to gather without the usual constraints of atmosphere, gravity, or communication barriers. Marcus stood in the central observation deck, watching delegations arrive from across the galaxy. His appearance had stabilized into something between his human form and his cosmic nature, still recognizably the man Zalara had fallen in love with, but now carrying an aura of power that made sensitive species instinctively respectful. The Corona Defense Force just sent word that they're withdrawing their objection to the new territorial accords, Zalara reported as she joined him at the viewing port. Her own transformation had continued over the months. The quantum entanglement, with Marcus deepening her connection to cosmic forces while maintaining her essential Zephyrian nature. She was something unprecedented, a bridge between the transcendent makers and the biological species they protected. That's the last of the major holdouts, Marcus observed. I wasn't sure General Krax would come around. I think the demonstration last month convinced him, Zalara said with a smile. When the militant Cronins had tested human resolve by attacking a peaceful colony world, Sarah Chun had responded not with violence, but by temporarily relocating the entire planet to a safer star system. The sheer casual display of power had made further resistance seem pointless. The new galactic order wasn't built on dominion or fear, but on something far more radical, genuine cooperation. The awakened makers had made it clear they had no interest in ruling over other species. Instead, they offered their abilities as tools for solving problems that had seemed impossible under the old paradigms. Worlds that had been dying from ecological collapse found themselves restored to pristine condition overnight. Species that had been locked in territorial disputes for centuries discovered that the makers could literally create new star systems for expansion. Diseases that had plagued entire civilizations simply ceased to exist as former human medical personnel remembered how to rewrite biological code at the molecular level. The Ethereal Collective wants to discuss establishing a joint research initiative, Zalara continued, reviewing the day's agenda. They think that combining their consciousness manipulation abilities with maker reality shaping could lead to new forms of existence. And the Valerian Republic? Chancellor Vex is still pushing for formal recognition of humanity as a separate category in galactic law. She wants legal frameworks that acknowledge the difference between cosmic entities and conventional biological species. Marcus sighed. The legal implications of the awakening had proved almost as complex as the physical ones. How do you write laws governing beings who could rewrite the laws of physics? How do you establish trade relationships with entities who could create any resource from base elements? What do you think? He asked his wife. Should we agree to separate classification? Zalara considered the question carefully. Over the months since her transformation, she had become something of an expert on the intersection between cosmic and biological existence. I think it misses the point. The goal isn't to maintain separation between makers and other species. It's to find new ways to work together. The humans who are choosing to remain in biological form are still part of the galactic community. The ones who've transcended physical existence entirely are still connected to the rest of us through bonds of affection and shared purpose. She was right, of course. Not all awakened humans had chosen to fully embrace their cosmic nature. Many, like Marcus himself, had opted to maintain biological forms and continue living integrated lives with other species. Their children, biological or adopted, were creating unprecedented hybrid cultures that blended cosmic awareness with conventional society. Other humans had chosen to transcend physical existence entirely, becoming beings of pure consciousness who shepherded entire solar systems or explored the deepest mysteries of reality itself. But even they maintained connections to the biological communities they had come from, serving as guardians and guides rather than distant gods. The Andorian Collective is requesting assistance with their population crisis, Zalara continued. They're running out of habitable planets, and their reproductive cycle requires very specific environmental conditions. What did Maria suggest? She thinks she can modify their biology to be more adaptable, or alternatively create custom worlds that perfectly match their needs. The collective is still debating whether they want biological modification or environmental solutions. This was the new reality of galactic civilization. Problems that had once seemed impossible to solve now had multiple potential solutions, each with different implications for the species involved. The challenge wasn't lack of capability, but helping civilizations choose wisely among unlimited options. A chime indicated that the afternoon session was about to begin. Marcus and Zalara made their way to the central conference hall, where representatives from across the galaxy waited to address the day's agenda. The hall itself was a marvel of hybrid architecture. Conventional seating accommodated physical beings, while specialized environments allowed energy-based life forms to participate comfortably. Translation systems handled not just language, but fundamental differences in how various species experience reality itself. Ambassador Zenth of the ethereal collective pulsed with excitement-colored emanations as he addressed the assembly. Honored beings, the Joint Consciousness Project has yielded unprecedented results. By linking ethereal awareness manipulation with maker reality shaping, we have successfully created the first truly shared experiential reality. A demonstration followed, a pocket of space where multiple species could literally share thoughts and sensations without losing their individual identities. Beings who had never been able to truly understand each other found themselves experiencing reality from radically different perspectives. Chancellor Vex clicked her mandibles appreciatively. The implications for diplomacy alone are staggering. If we can truly understand how other species experience reality, many of our conflicts may prove to be based on simple misunderstanding rather than genuine incompatibility. General Krax, his scarred features showing grudging respect, stood to address the assembly. The Cronin Defense Force wishes to formally request assistance with our warrior culture adaptation program. Our species has been shaped by millennia of conflict, but in a galaxy where the makers can solve most problems without violence, we need to find new purpose for our martial traditions. David Okafor, the former artist who now painted with cosmic forces, stepped forward. What if we redirected Cronin martial excellence toward protecting developing civilizations? Your species' combat skills could be invaluable for safeguarding younger species while they establish themselves among the stars. It was a perfect example of how the new galactic order worked. Instead of suppressing or eliminating cultural traits that seemed problematic, the combined wisdom of makers and conventional species found ways to redirect them toward constructive purposes. As the session continued, Marcus found himself marveling at how much had changed in such a short time. The galaxy that had once been divided by fear, competition, and resource scarcity was rapidly becoming something unprecedented, a true community of consciousness. But perhaps the most significant change was personal. During a break in the formal proceedings, Marcus and Zalara walked together through the station's observation gardens, living ecosystems that Maria Santos had designed to thrive in a unique environment between dimensions. "Do you ever regret it?" Zalara asked as they paused beside a fountain that cycled through 7 different states of matter. Giving up the quiet life we had before? Marcus considered the question. Their old life had been peaceful, centered around simple pleasures like morning tea and evening conversations. Now they spent their days managing cosmic forces and reshaping galactic civilization. "I regret that we lost the privacy," he said finally. "I regret that our relationship became a symbol rather than just something that belonged to us." But the awakening itself? No, I don't regret that. For the first time since we scattered ourselves across the galaxy, my people are able to be completely honest about who we are. And for the first time in galactic history, all species are working together as true partners rather than just neighbors. Zalara's bioluminescent patterns shifted to warm gold, the color of contentment among her people. "I've been thinking about something. Before the awakening, you chose to live as a human rather than embrace your cosmic nature. You gave up godhood for the chance to experience mortality and love. And now you're finding a way to be both. Cosmic and personal, transcendent and intimate. You're not choosing between your nature and your relationships anymore. You're integrating them." Marcus stopped walking, struck by the insight. She was right. For eons, the makers had believed they had to choose between cosmic consciousness and individual connection. They had scattered themselves and hidden their nature because they thought power and love were incompatible. But their bond, this unprecedented connection between a cosmic entity and a biological being, had proved that assumption wrong. They could be both transcendent and personal, both universal and individual. The awakening hadn't forced him to choose between his cosmic nature and his love for Zalara. It had shown him how to embrace both simultaneously. "We're creating something new," he realized, not just in terms of galactic politics, but in terms of what it means to be conscious in this universe. A form of existence that integrates cosmic awareness with personal connection. And we're not the only ones, Zalara pointed out. Look around the galaxy. Humans are choosing to remain connected to biological communities. Other species are learning to channel cosmic forces through their natural abilities. The barriers between transcendent and mundane are dissolving. As if summoned by their conversation, Sarah Chan materialized beside them, not through teleportation, but by choosing to focus her consciousness in their location. She had become something beyond physical form, but she maintained connections to hundreds of biological communities across the galaxy. The education initiative is working better than we hoped, she reported. Young beings from dozens of species are learning to channel cosmic forces while maintaining their cultural identities. We're not creating copies of humans. We're helping each species discover their own path to transcendence. This was perhaps the most remarkable development of all. The awakening hadn't created a galaxy dominated by human consciousness, but one where every species was discovering its own potential for transcendence. The ethereal collective was learning to make their consciousness manipulation abilities permanent. The crystalline shard speakers were using harmonic resonance to reshape reality on a molecular level. Even the mechanical synthetics were finding ways to integrate cosmic awareness into their quantum processing systems. As the day's conference sessions concluded, Marcus and Zalara returned to their private quarters, a space that existed partially in normal reality and partially in cosmic consciousness, allowing them to be together in ways that transcended physical proximity. What comes next? Zalara asked as they settled into their evening routine. Even with cosmic powers at their disposal, they still treasured simple moments like sharing tea and watching the stars. Marcus considered the question as he looked out at a galaxy that was transforming itself with each passing day. New species were emerging from a synthesis of biological and cosmic consciousness. Ancient conflicts were being resolved through shared understanding. The very nature of civilization was evolving towards something unprecedented. I think, he said slowly, we keep learning. For eons, my people thought we understood the universe because we helped create it. But watching it grow, seeing what you and the other species have built from what we gave you, you've surprised us in the best possible ways. We're all surprising each other, Zalara replied. That's what makes this so extraordinary. None of us, makers, Zephyrians, any species, could have imagined what we're becoming together. Outside their window, the stars burned with new spectra as reality itself continued to evolve. The galaxy was no longer divided between young and ancient species, between biological and cosmic consciousness, between ruled and rulers. It was becoming a single, vast community of beings exploring the infinite possibilities of existence together. And at the center of it all, the love between an ancient cosmic entity and a biological empress continued to serve as proof that some bonds transcend every barrier the universe can create. The age of secrets was over. The age of integration had begun. And somewhere in the quantum foam between dimensions, the transformed void hunters, now void gardeners, tended new realities with the same dedication they had once brought to destruction, having learned that creation was far more satisfying than consumption. The galaxy had never been more alive, more connected, or more full of potential than it was at this moment when ancient beings chose to love rather than rule, and biological species chose to grow rather than fear. In the end, that was humanity's true gift to the galaxy. Not cosmic power, but the knowledge that love could bridge any gap, heal any wound, and unite any difference. The universe, it turned out, was large enough for everyone.